What's shaking, babe? What was that? I just woke up. What's shaking, bacon? I'm Joni Simon. Welcome to my studio. This is where I do food photography. So if you're into that, you go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And today we're jumping into a Lightroom editing video. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I get a lot of requests for folks to explain how I get light and bright and airy images. Because if you've checked out my Instagram at all, you'll know that there's kind of a variety, right? Like I love the dark and moody, but I love the light and bright and airy. And for me as a freelance photographer, I want to be able to fulfill the needs of a wide variety of clients, and so I like to showcase that in my Instagram, in my portfolio. So today we are going to take this image before and turn it into this after. So if you want to see how I do it, you stick around. Okay, so I shot this bowl of udon noodles yesterday, and in terms of lighting, I use my Westcott LED Flex Matte light for this, and then a big old giant diffuser, because of course we can see we've got some really nice soft light going on here. But what we want to do is take this image and turn it into light and bright and airy. So I'm just going to take you step by step here in Lightroom. I've got this image loaded into my Lightroom library, into the catalog. If you need help with that, or even where to get started in Lightroom, I'll go ahead and link some helpful like getting started videos down below. But once you've got the image in Lightroom, then we hop to the develop module and have a party. So the very first thing that I start off with is to make sure that this area surrounding the image is actually white, because if we are going for light and bright and airy, we want to have a sense of where white is. So if you just go ahead and hold the control key, then you can select what is the background. Now I think probably a lot of you, it comes as medium gray, maybe? I can't remember what it comes as, but I go ahead and select white so that again, I have a true sense of what I'm aiming for. I don't want to make this all true white, but definitely leaning towards the light and airy, and that will give me a really nice baseline. So now we're gonna hop over into the white balance. And so this is as shot, and I shot this in raw, so we have that great degree of flexibility to morph and change the colors and correct the white balance. And so I'm gonna go ahead and open up the drop down and select auto so that, you know, let Lightroom see what my white balance is. And actually, I like that. I think that looks just about right on. But of course, if you were going warmer toned or cooler toned, you could manually adjust the scales on your own, but I'm gonna leave this for now. Okay, so now what you might think is, okay, let's go ahead and increase the exposure to brighten this up. Well, here's the problem with increasing exposure, is that it increases the exposure of every single tone in the image. So from the darks to the midtones to the lights, that it brightens up everything. Well, we don't want to do that because look, it kills our subject. It kills our image. So we want to be able to maintain the integrity of our subject while brightening up everything else. So what I will typically do when I am doing light and airy, first things first, is take the contrast and dial that down by about 19 to 20, somewhere in that range, to soften things up, because again, light, airy, ethereal, not a lot of hard lines. When we increase contrast, that is making a larger divide between our dark tones and our light tones, and so this is sort of softening things up, not making it quite so hard and harsh. Now I'm going to leave the highlights and shadows for now. I will probably come back to them, but I'm going to take the whites, and the whites is all of the white tones in the image, right? Because any given image is made up of blacks and grays and whites. And so we're going to take everything that is more on the white end of the scale and increase that. And as you can see, it's really not affecting the bowl or anything in the foreground, but all those whites that are in the background, really brightening them up. I kind of dig that. So we'll go ahead and leave that there. And I'm gonna leave the blacks for now as well and jump over now into the tone curve, where we have a whole lot of fun. That's where a lot of the magic of light and bright and airy comes from, is here in the tone curve. So I'm very first gonna start out by crushing the blacks, which you've probably seen me do this before. We just lift up on this a skosh, and you can see how that's taking those black tones. You can even watch how this affects the histogram. But we just take those black tones and we lift up on them. It softens them up, it turns them more gray, but we do lose a little bit of contrast, and I want to add some of that back in. So if I drop another little dot here on the line, just by clicking right on the line, and then bring that down just a bit, not a bunch, not a bunch. And then I bring this spot right up here, create another spot, and bring the whites up. And now we're starting to get something much lighter, right? All right, we're doing good. So now I'm gonna open back up the curve down here, this portion of the tone curve. And now I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the lights. And this is where we really see a big impact. Again, though, it's not changing our subject, which is what I love, because that's still defined, that still has character and personality. And then let's bring up the darks right here as well. And all of a sudden we are really seeing how we've ventured into bright and airy land. But we're not done yet. We're not done yet. I'm gonna bring up those darks just a little bit more. Again, we don't wanna blow things out too much. Now we're looking at our histogram, we're like, holy whites McGee. And I would say that, you know, from a technical standpoint, we're definitely, whenever I do light and airy images, they're technically not a correct histogram because we really are taking those whites so far off the scale. You know, really, like a lot of people would say, the right kind of histogram is one that all falls right in with the middle, and it's a nice little, you know, curve. But we're getting a little wild and crazy, a little artistic up in here, but I don't want to blow out too many highlights. Now, if you want to see what's being blown out, just hit the J key and it'll show you what you're losing detail in. And what I see right now is that I'm mostly just losing detail in that tablecloth in the back. And that's not, again, really bothering me because the food is my subject, the food is my focus. And so as long as the food isn't blown out for me, I'm a happy camper. Now, I am going to go back up though into the basic panel up where the highlights and shadows were and dial down the highlights just a little bit just to reclaim some of the areas that are blown out on the food. Now, as I'm starting to edit this, I do feel like it is a little bit too warm. And so what I'm gonna do, I feel like the tint is okay, but I'm gonna take the blues down just a little bit. There we go. Oh, that feels nice. That feels very nice. So now it feels like we are closer to a true white when we compare this background over to here. Again, there's a lot of grays in this. We're not going for a true, clear, complete 100% white, but we are going for light and airy. All right, now at this point, I do get into the shadows a little bit, so I'm gonna lift the shadows just a skosh. But now here's the thing to watch out with light and airy, and I say this all the time, is you just gotta make sure to be careful because the light and airy will only make sense as long as you have some dark tones in the image to ground it, to give some definition to your subject. If everything across the entire board is light and airy and there's no shadows and there's no darkness and there's no definition, you have no subject, you have no image. So we want to make sure to have what we call a good range of tonal contrast. Again, this image really lives very highly in those bright white tones in the image, but we still are going to have enough dark tones in order to ground it and to give it some depth. All right, now let's play around with the clarity slider here and you'll see that that really adds some definition, especially what I love is it adds some texture here in the tablecloth. So that is a little though far for my taste, especially because we're going for light and airy, but just a little touch of clarity there. All right, now back to the tone curve, and I know I'm jumping around a lot. My apologies. This is just sort of like my mental working process of how I jump through an image. Like I see something and I'm like, okay, I want to alter that. Now I want to alter that. It's sort of a building blocks process. So I do jump around a lot, but probably the more you get used to Lightroom and where the features are and where the functions are, you will find yourself jumping around a lot too. All right, so now we jump into the tone curve and we jump down to the shadow slider. And to me, this is like the secret ninja weapon of Lightroom, the ability to maintain that light and airy feel, but really drive home the definition without over darkening our subject. Let me show you what I mean. So if I just take this down a little bit, like I could take it down a lot of bit and it really fills in those shadows, but you can see it's really not altering any of those bright and light areas of the image. It's only filling in the shadowy areas. But we go ahead and just pull that down a little bit. It really gives some depth and some three-dimensionality to the noodles, which the point of the whole image is the noodles. And so I love to have a bright and airy image and then just throw those shadows down a touch, and it's really gonna make your subjects pop. This is also great for portrait photography. If you're doing kind of that light and airy style, this is a great place to play with. So now we come into the colors and we really have a lot of greens and yellows and oranges, kind of those analogous colors colors there on that side of the color wheel. And so I'm going to start with the greens. I love to make greens look more luscious, so I do that by decreasing the luminance here. And then I'm going to take them a little bit toward the blue, but not much, because of course we've got the hue slider, right? That we've got green is on a sliding scale of yellow to blue. And so I'm going to put a little blue in it, but not much, because this is where you can get really out of control super fast. But the greens do feel a little overpowering right now, so I'm also going to dial back the saturation on them. There we go. Okay, and then I've also got some oranges that are in those noodles. I'm actually going to brighten those up a little bit, bring up the luminance on those, just make them kind of pop, make them glow. And then on the hue, I am going to dial it more towards the yellow. For me, mentally, I've got a thing where noodles kind of need to be more yellow than orange. And then wherever there's green, there's usually a good bit of yellow, especially when it comes to vegetables. And so let's just play with it a little bit, see what we've got. Yep, we do have a good bit of yellow. So if you really wanted to kind of make this deeper and richer, I'm going to take that luminance down just a little bit, again, to bring some definition, to bring some richness into our dish. But I'm going to take down the saturation just a little bit as well, because I really want this to read green and fresh and vibrant. And then I like to enable the profile corrections. You can see what that did is that is programmed to know what lens I was using, and every single lens has some sort of like little personality on it of things that it does that may not be desirable. And so in this case, this 50mm lens usually has a little bit of darkening on the edges. So if we hit that enable profile corrections, it removes that, and again, helping us get that light and airy. All right, things are looking good. So now let's just do a little check of before and after. We're definitely getting into the light and bright and airy, but again, we have maintained our subject. We have not lost it. We've not blown it out. So, all right. So now at this point, I am going to take up the exposure, but just one little tick just to brighten it up. And then to finally drive the light and airy home. Now you could definitely leave this like this. I actually kind of like it this way. I think we've got a good mix of like, I like the darks that are down here in the tablecloth, that we've got some nice contrast that sort of defines the bowl and sets it out, because we have a very simple composition here. And so having that variety of grays and whites, I think just adds to the dimensionality of the image. But now the final little ninja skill, and I have a whole video all about this, radial filters, but I'll just show you how I apply it specifically for this image. If you want more information about how to use radial filters, how they work, definitely go check that video out. I'll link it right up over here. But I'm just going to take that radial filter, drag it around our bowl. All right, give it a little wideness because we don't want to impact the bowl itself. And then let's just for kicks be able to see where that filter is falling. So wherever it is red is where that filter is going to impact. It's like a mask. So let's go ahead and click that off. And then what I can do, and what really again helps toward that light and airy, I first start off by just decreasing the clarity a bit. You can see if we take down that clarity, it gives it sort of that floating, airy, heavenly feel. Don't go too crazy on that, because then you can look like, oh, they really put a filter on there. Again, nuance, we've talked about that before. So take down the clarity just a skosh, and then I will usually pull up the shadows a bit. I don't want this to feel super pronounced and obvious that there is a filter there, that there's a marked difference, that there's some sort of like bullseye circle around our subject. So just some nice little nuance changes. Pull up the shadows there, maybe increase this exposure just a bit. You can increase the whites. That will also just give you a nice sort of light feeling. But as you can see up here in the top, we've gotten very, very close to true white. So it's probably a good indication to stop, because if this again turns all true white, then we just kind of have a flat image. But I think that looks pretty darn tasty and looks pretty darn good. So now, of course, these things could be manipulated and changed based on your particular taste. But now this gives you an idea of what you can take an image like this and turn it into an image like this with some pretty simple tools. There was not a lot of next level shenanigans with that, right? That was pretty straightforward and easy. But again, depending on your particular flavor and spin, you can have a lot of fun with these tools and brighten up your images, make that light and bright and airy, easy peasy. So hopefully you got some fun ideas. If you edit any photos light and bright and airy, feel free to tag me. I'm over on Instagram. And two, if you want to go even further behind the scenes of this udon noodle bowl, B-roll and how I set it all up and the staging of it. I actually do a weekly behind the scenes deep dive over on my Patreon page. So my Patreon patrons who are signed up and members get special access to once a week bonus videos behind the scenes. So if you want to check that out, I will also link that down below. So thank you so much for stopping by the studio. Hope you have a fantastic day. Take a ton of pictures out there, and I'll see you real soon, okay? Bye.